A few years ago, I was visiting my brother Chris in Seattle, flying out of Philadelphia International Airport with a connecting flight in Chicago O'Hare. We tried to get together with our parents at least once a year, and we took turns hosting. This year was Chris's year to host, and the occasion was actually him getting a promotion, not the holidays. Therefore, I didn't have to fight the crowds, which was a huge plus. My parents were flying in from elsewhere, so I was going solo. I got ready and left my apartment around 6 p.m., driving over to Philadelphia International. It took me less than half an hour to park, check in, and get through security, and my flight didn't leave until 8:30 p.m., so I had some time to kill. I walked up and down the terminal for a bit, taking in the mostly deserted liminal space. I bought a Pepsi from a vending machine and kept walking, eventually needing to use the restroom. But then, something happened. Something to this day I can't explain. The restroom was near gate C-17, tucked around a corner past a shuttered coffee shop. It was one of those standard airport bathrooms, beige tiles, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, and a faint smell of industrial cleaner. There was one other guy in there, washing his hands at the sink. He looked like a typical business traveler, gray suit, tired eyes, probably in his late 40s. I nodded at him out of habit, but he didn't acknowledge me. Instead, he just kept scrubbing his hands under the water. I went into a stall, did my business, and took maybe 3 minutes, tops. When I came out to wash my hands, the guy was gone. The restroom was empty, silent, except for the hum of the lights. I dried my hands and stepped back into the terminal, and that's when I noticed it, the silence. Not just quiet, but an oppressive, unnatural absence of sound. There were no announcements over the intercom, no hum of conversation, and no clatter of rolling suitcases. The terminal was completely deserted. The gate areas, which had a few scattered travelers before, were now empty. The chairs were vacant, no gate agents at the counters, and no janitors pushing carts. Even the digital screens displaying flight information were blank, just glowing a faint blue. My Pepsi bottle, which I had left on a seat outside the restroom, was gone. I checked my phone. It was 7:15 p.m. My flight was still over an hour away, so where was everyone? I walked back towards gate C-17, expecting to see at least a few people waiting for the next flight, but the rows of seats were empty. The overhead lights also seemed dimmer, casting long shadows across the polished floor. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed slightly, but no one answered. This is when a cold knot started to form in my stomach. I told myself maybe there was an evacuation, some kind of security drill I hadn't heard about, but I don't know if I even believed it at the time. There were no alarms and no flashing lights, nothing to indicate anything was wrong. There was only emptiness. I started walking toward the main terminal, passing closed shops and dark restaurants. The air felt heavy, like I was moving through fog, though the air was clear. My footsteps sounded too loud, each step reverberating in the stillness. When I reached the main concourse, I froze. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows showed the tarmac outside, but there were no planes at the gates. There were no baggage carts, no ground crew, no blinking lights on the runway. Just complete pitch darkness, stretching out beyond the glass. My reflection stared back at me. For a split second, I thought I saw something move behind me in the glass. I spun around, and there was nothing, just more empty chairs and blank screens. I pulled out my phone again to call Chris, but the screen showed no service. That didn't make any sense. I had full bars in the restroom just minutes ago. I tried connecting to the airport Wi-Fi. Nothing. My heart was pounding now. I started jogging toward the security checkpoint, thinking maybe I could find someone, anyone, at the main entrance. But when I got there, the TSA area was abandoned. The scanners were off, the belts still, and the ropes hung limply in their stanchions. That's when I heard it, a faint sound, like a low hum or vibration, coming from somewhere deeper in the terminal. It wasn't mechanical, at least not typical mechanical, it wasn't like the buzz of lights or the hum of an air conditioner. It felt almost alive, like a distant heartbeat pulsing through the walls. I don't know why, but I followed it, my sneakers squeaking against the floor. The sound led me back toward the sea gates, past where I'd been before. As I walked, the air grew colder and my breath started to fog, which made no sense. It was July. Eventually I reached a hallway I hadn't noticed before, a service corridor marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The hum was louder here, vibrating in my chest. Against every rational instinct, I pushed the door open. The hallway was narrow, lined with unmarked doors, lit by a single flickering bulb. At the far end, maybe 20 feet away, stood the man from the restroom. He was facing away from me, standing perfectly still, his head tilted slightly like he was listening to something. His suit jacket hung loosely, and his hands were at his sides, fingers twitching faintly. "Hey!" I called out, my voice cracking. "What's going on? Where is everyone?" He didn't turn around. Instead, his head tilted further, unnaturally far, almost like an owl's. My stomach dropped. I took a step back, and the door behind me slammed shut with a deafening bang. The hum stopped, replaced by a low, guttural sound, like a growl, but not from any animal I'd ever heard. The man started to turn, slowly. I caught a glimpse of his face. His eyes were wrong, too large and too dark, like black voids where his pupils should have been. His mouth stretched into a grin that was too wide, showing too many teeth. I didn't wait to see more. I yanked at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The growling grew louder and closer, and I could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway. I ran to the next nearest door, a maintenance closet, and threw it open, slamming it behind me. I fumbled for my phone, using the flashlight to scan the tiny room, mops, buckets, and a shelf of cleaning supplies. I wedged myself behind a stack of boxes, trying to control my breathing as the growling stopped right outside the door. For what felt like hours, I sat there, clutching my phone, too terrified to move. The silence was worse than the noise. It was like the airport itself was holding its breath. Then, faintly, I heard the intercom crackle to life. A voice, distorted and garbled, said, "Passenger Michael Reynolds, please report to gate C-17. Your flight is now boarding." That was my name, and my flight. But I wasn't about to leave that closet. I stayed there, curled up, until my phone battery died and the darkness swallowed me. I don't know how long I was in there. It could have been hours, or maybe days. Eventually I heard voices, normal voices, people talking and laughing. I pushed the door open and stumbled back into the terminal, not being seen. It was alive again, filled with travelers and gate agents and the hum of activity. My Pepsi bottle was back on the seat where I'd left it. My phone showed full service, and the time was 7:20 p.m., only 5 minutes after I'd checked it last. I made my flight, but I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not Chris, not my parents, not even the airport staff. Instead, I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, maybe from stress or dehydration. But when I got to Seattle, I found something in my pocket, a crumpled baggage claim sticker, not mine, with a single word scrawled on it in jagged handwriting: "Stay." To this day, I avoid connecting flights through O'Hare, and I never, ever use the restroom in an airport alone. I went to college out of state and was planning to visit my parents and younger sister for Christmas my freshman year. I much preferred driving, not because I was afraid of flying, but because I just didn't like the hassle and enjoyed road trips and being able to drive my own car. However, there was a snowstorm coming in the next day, which I would be caught in if I drove, so my mom convinced me to just fly. I figured that was fine and had one of my friends drop me off at the airport with my suitcase. I was flying out of Pittsburgh International Airport with a connecting flight in Denver. It was December 20th, and the airport was busier than I expected, with people rushing to catch holiday flights. I checked in and got through security by around 4 p.m. and found out my flight to Denver was delayed an hour due to weather prep. My boarding time was now 6:30 p.m., so I had some time to kill. I grabbed a coffee from a kiosk, wandered the terminal, and scrolled through my phone. The place was buzzing, families with kids, business travelers typing furiously on laptops, and the constant drone of gate announcements. Eventually I needed to hit the restroom. I found one near gate B12, a standard airport setup with gray tiles and overly bright lights. It was crowded, with a few guys at the urinals and sinks, so I slipped into a stall. I was in there for maybe 5 minutes, texting my sister about her Christmas list. But when I stepped out, something was wrong, something I still can't fully wrap my head around. The restroom was empty, and not just empty, but silent, like the air itself had gone still. The sinks were dry with no water dripping, and there was no hum of the hand dryers either. I chalked it up to coincidence and walked out into the terminal, because what else could be causing that? But that's when my stomach dropped. The entire place was deserted. There were no travelers, no gate agents, and no cleaning staff. There was nothing. The rows of seats were vacant, the shop shuttered, their lights off. The digital flight boards were now dark, not even a flicker of information. My coffee cup, which I left on a table outside the restroom, was gone. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead, and even that felt muted, like the airport was holding its breath. I checked my phone, 4:45 p.m. and no service. Not a single bar, despite having a full signal earlier. I tried the Wi-Fi, and there was nothing. This is when my heart started racing. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice echoed, but no one answered. The terminal stretched out in both directions, eerily quiet, the carpeted floor swallowing the sound of my footsteps. I started walking toward the main concourse, hoping to find someone at security or a help desk. The windows along the terminal showed the tarmac outside, but there were no planes. No baggage carts, no ground crew, just an endless gray haze. It was as if the fog had swallowed the world beyond the glass. I tried to rationalize what was happening, and told myself it was a drill, maybe an evacuation I'd somehow missed. But I hadn't heard any alarms, and there were no signs of panic, just emptiness. As I neared the security checkpoint, I noticed something on the floor, a child-stuffed bear lying face down in the middle of the concourse. It hadn't been there before. I hesitated, then picked it up. It was damp, like it had been left out in the rain, and it smelled faintly of mildew. I dropped it and wiped my hands on my jeans, my skin crawling. Then I heard it, a faint tapping, like fingers drumming on a hard surface, coming from back toward the B gates. It was rhythmic and deliberate, not like a machine or a loose pipe. I froze, straining to listen. The tapping stopped, replaced by a soft, shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet across the carpet. I turned and saw nothing, just the empty terminal, but the air felt heavier now, like a storm was building inside the building. Against my better judgment, or maybe because I didn't know what else to do, I followed the sound, my sneakers squeaking as I moved. The shuffling led me to a gate I hadn't noticed before, B13. That's weird. I thought I could have sworn the gates only went up to B12. The sign above the counter was blank, and the jet bridge door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. The shuffling stopped, but now there was a new sound, a low, breathy whisper, too faint to make out words, coming from inside the jet bridge. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move, like my feet were glued to the floor. The whisper grew louder, forming words I could barely understand. "You shouldn't be here." I snapped out of it and backed away, my heart hammering. As I turned to run, I saw something in the reflection of the gate's window, a figure standing at the far end of the terminal, too far to make out details. But it was tall and thin and wrong, like its limbs were too long for its body. It didn't move. Instead, it just stood there, watching me. I bolted toward the main terminal, not looking back. The whispering followed me, echoing in my ears even as I ran, growing louder and more insistent. "Stay, stay, stay." I reached the security checkpoint, now completely abandoned, and kept running until I found an emergency exit. I pushed through, expecting alarms to blare, but there was nothing, just silence. I stumbled into a stairwell, cold and dimly lit, and ran down until I hit a door leading outside. I burst onto the tarmac, gasping, and found myself surrounded by planes, baggage carts, and workers in neon vests. They were all moving like nothing had happened. The airport was alive again, the sky clear, with no trace of the gray haze. My phone buzzed, full service, 4:50 p.m. Only 5 minutes had passed. I made it to my gate, trying to act normal, but still completely shaken. The terminal was packed again, people chatting, and kids running around. My coffee cup was back on the table where I'd left it. I boarded my flight, but the whole way to Denver, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. When I landed, I checked my suitcase, and inside, tucked between my clothes, was a stuffed bear from the concourse. I hadn't packed it. Hell, I knew I had left it right where it was, on the ground. I threw it out at the airport, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear that whispering again. It's faint and distant, saying, "You shouldn't be here." I haven't flown since, and I never will again. I've worked in marketing at the same company for almost 10 years now, and things have gone pretty well. In that time, I met my wife, settled down, and had a family, so the rest of my life was great too. Nothing too out of the ordinary has happened to me, or maybe just one thing. Something took place that I still can't explain. And incidentally, it happened right before I boarded my flight for the interview for my job. It was 2015 and I was flying out of Charlotte Douglas International Airport with a connecting flight in Dallas-Fort Worth. The interview was in Seattle, a big step up from the entry-level gigs I'd been grinding through. I was nervous but excited, and the airport was a typical late afternoon scene, busy but not chaotic, with business travelers and families weaving through the terminals. I got through check-in and security by around 3, leaving me about an hour before my 4:15 flight. I grabbed a sandwich from a deli kiosk, sat near gate A9, and scrolled through my phone to review my interview notes. After a while, the sandwich hit me, and I needed to use the restroom. I found one just down the concourse, a standard airport setup with white tiles, flickering fluorescence, and the faint hum of ventilation. There were a couple of guys inside, one at the sink and another leaving just as I entered. I went into a stall, took care of business, and was out in maybe 4 minutes. But when I stepped back into the terminal, something was wrong, something I still can't make sense of. The terminal was completely deserted. No passengers, no gate agents, no cleaning crews, just rows of empty seats stretching into the distance. The shops were dark, their metal gates pulled down. The flight information screens were blank, glowing a faint gray like they'd been switched off. My sandwich wrapper, which I knew for a fact I'd left on the seat next to my bag, was gone. The air was heavy, the kind of stillness you feel before a storm, and the only sound was my own breathing. I checked my phone, 3:40 p.m., no service. Not a single bar. That didn't make sense. I had a full signal before. I also tried the airport Wi-Fi, but nothing connected. My first thought was that I'd missed some kind of evacuation, like maybe there was a security threat or a fire drill. But I was pretty sure I could hear that stuff in the bathroom if it had happened, and there were no alarms and no announcements. There were also no signs of chaos, just an eerie, unnatural quiet. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice bounced off the walls, unanswered. I started walking toward the main terminal, my footsteps sounding too loud against the polished floor. The massive windows showed the tarmac outside, but it was empty. No planes, no baggage carts, and no workers. There was just a flat, featureless darkness, like the world beyond the airport had vanished. My heart was pounding now, but I tried my best to stay composed. I headed toward the security checkpoint, figuring I'd find someone there. As I walked, I noticed something odd on the floor, a single boarding pass lying in the middle of the concourse. I picked it up. It was for my flight, Charlotte to Dallas, with my name on it, David Miller. But I hadn't printed my boarding pass. I was using the digital one on my phone. The paper felt old, almost brittle, and the ink was smudged, like it had been sitting out for years. I didn't want to leave it for some reason, so I shoved it in my pocket and kept moving. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic creaking, like a door swinging slowly on its hinges, coming from a side hallway near gate A11. It was marked employees only, but the door was cracked open, a sliver of dim light spilling out. I don't know why I didn't just keep walking, maybe because there was nowhere else to walk to, but something about the sound pulled me in, like it was calling me. I pushed the door open and found a narrow service corridor, lined with lockers and pipes, and lit by a single flickering bulb. The creaking was louder now, coming from around a corner at the far end. I took a few steps, my palms sweaty, and called out again. "Is someone there?" The creaking stopped abruptly. For a moment there was nothing but silence, but then a voice, low, raspy, and barely audible, whispered, "You're early." It came from behind me, but when I turned the hallway was empty. My skin prickled, and I started backing toward the door. That's when I saw it. A shadow, stretching along the wall, tall and distorted, like a person, but not quite. It moved, sliding toward me, though I couldn't see what was casting it. The air grew colder, my breath fogging in front of me, which made no sense for a summer afternoon. I turned and ran, slamming through the door back into the terminal. The shadow didn't follow me, but the whispering did, now coming from all directions, overlapping like a chorus. Early, early, early. I sprinted toward the security checkpoint, my bag bouncing against my back. When I got there, the area was empty. No TSA agents, no scanners running, just abandoned belts and bins. I kept running, desperate to find an exit, but the terminal seemed to stretch on forever, the gates repeating in a loop. I ran past A9, then A10, then A11, and then A9 again, like I was trapped in a maze. Finally, I saw a sign for an emergency exit and shoved through the door into a stairwell. It was cold, the walls damp, and it smelled faintly of rust. I ran down 2 flights, my footsteps echoing, until I hit a door labeled ground level. I burst through it and found myself back in the terminal, right outside the restroom near gate A9. The airport was alive again, buzzing with people, announcements crackling over the intercom and planes visible on the tarmac. My phone buzzed, 3:45 p.m., full service. My sandwich wrapper, it was back on the seat, exactly where I'd left it. I boarded my flight, shaken but trying to focus on the interview. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not my wife and not my coworkers, not even the therapist I saw a few years later. I got the job and moved to Seattle and built a life, but I've never gone back to Charlotte Douglas. When I unpacked my bag that night, I found the boarding pass again, tucked inside my wallet. The smudged ink was clear now, and below my name was a handwritten note, "Don't come back." I'd burned it, but sometimes, when I'm alone in the house, I hear that creaking sound again. It's faint and distant, like a door swinging open somewhere I can't see. And I wonder if I was early for something I was never meant to find.